So I just recently platinumed Rainbow Six Extraction, and I think it's only fair I give my closing thoughts on this game. As a huge fan of the Rainbow Six franchise, I won't lie and say that Extraction hasn't left me disappointed. While I do think the Outbreak event was and is a super cool idea, I was never fully on board with there being a full game around the idea. In my opinion, what made the Outbreak event cool was it was a one-off thing, and that's just not me saying that because it's apparently a hot take for Rainbow Six to be about counter-terrorists fighting terrorists, but because as a concept, there's only so much you can do with a quasi-horror game involving aliens. That doesn't mean there isn't stuff you can do, it just means you're limited in what you can be. Rainbow Six Extraction shows both the potential and unfortunate limitations of this idea. Extraction is set in an alternate universe to Siege, but it is still considered a mainline game. Essentially, the events of Operation Chimera happened, the world, and by the world I mean the United States, has been invaded by a virus originating in the Tunguska event, a real meteor incident that happened in Russia in 1908. If you've ever played the Resistance games, this is the exact same premise. The Chimera virus and Resistance originated in Russia from the Tunguska event. Rainbow Six Extraction not only uses the same event, but also calls it the Chimera Parasite. I have no idea if this is meant to be an Easter egg from a hardcore Resistance fan that worked on the game, or if this entire idea came up from a former Insomniac developer who got to work with Ubisoft later down in their career, or what, but either way, Rainbow Six Extraction is this weird Frankenstein of ideas from older Rainbow Six games and Resistance. These are also two of my favorite game franchises, so you would think this would be my favorite game ever. It's not. I don't hate Extraction, but I definitely wouldn't rank it anywhere in my top 100 games. This is a game that has so much potential that the developers never capitalized on. From story ideas that went nowhere to a noticeable lack of content and media and a repetitive gameplay loop, Extraction is fun only in short bursts. So let's talk about it. Extraction is set in an alternate universe where the Outbreak event in Operation Chimera was real and happened. Rainbow has been rebranded into React, where they now combat aliens instead of terrorists. Now, one of the major things the game never explains is what is actually happening with the aliens. The game wants you to think that the Archeans have taken over the world, but I think the Archeans are only contained to one of the maps you deploy in, which is interesting, because this means life is still going on around this. If that's true, then it would have been nice to actually see the outside world and how they feel about what's happening in the subzones. We also don't ever learn what the Archeans want or why they're evolving. Every mission is set inside a containment zone that React has set up. Every objective involves something about keeping the alien population in check, or occasionally saving someone who got lost there. There's never anything like a rival company trying to weaponize the aliens, or civilians who broke into the containment zone, or even something to prevent the aliens from breaking out of their prison. It's always just go in, kill a bunch, do something, leave. There's never really anything direct about what's happening. The Archeans are just kind of existing in their prison, and don't really seem to care. They don't want to get out. They aren't attacking humanity and killing them anymore after the initial outbreak. They're just existing, separated from the rest of the world. The game, which, remind you, is a Tom Clancy game, doesn't have any sort of political talking points about this. The Archeans aren't doing anything except just kind of existing, so you would think that there would be groups of people who oppose military intervention against the aliens not attacking humans. If you really want to look at it a certain way, any hostilities in the game are because you went in their spot. You started attacking them. The game could have had an interesting real-world analogy to what you're doing to the aliens, adding in some of the political aspects Tom Clancy games are known for. Maybe something like a PETA-type organization that watches the subzones and deploys a squad to hunt down React members who are attacking the aliens, or even something like the White Masks who want to weaponize the Archeans and use them to help push their ideology of violence and death, or even something as simple as a rival company that wants all the fame of containing the aliens and will go through violent actions against React to get that goal. So many cool ideas that would have added in just a little bit of political discussion, a little bit of what makes this a Tom Clancy game. I'm not opposed to the idea of a sci-fi like Tom Clancy story. This could have been an interesting idea with some political or bureaucratic ideas happening. But we just don't get that. It's just played safe. The aliens are aliens. They're hostile towards humanity. No one cares what you do to them. I'm not saying you're supposed to be in the wrong for fighting them. I'm saying, what if there was some opposition, not the aliens, but also humans, who didn't like what you were doing to them, or wanted to do worse things to them, or even wanted to use the aliens as weapons of war? Part of the issue with the game's story is the game just doesn't really end. It just kind of stops. There's no ending. This was meant to be a live service game that went on for a few years and continued adding in content. But since they didn't do this, it just stops once you've finished it, leaving a lot to be desired. Now, of course, stories in Rainbow Six games are never super unique. They're usually simple ideas with more behind-the-scenes implications. So we need to talk about gameplay. Well, sadly, there's not a lot to talk about gameplay-wise. The game is incredibly repetitive. After like an hour, you've probably played everything there is to play. Go here, do this, kill that, leave. The only thing that breaks the gameplay up are the new locations you get after reaching a certain level, and the occasional boss on harder difficulties. And even then, once you've done that and been to those maps, you've done it all. Repeat for about 70 hours. There are a few game modes and events, but they're limited too. You have assignments, which are like weekly challenges you have to complete with like varying factors. Events, which just add in a minor element to the core gameplay. And Maelstrom, a rank type mode that has 9 subzones to fight in, each one getting harder with each level. This would be okay, but in order to even do these, you need to have 2 other people with you. And since this game is dead, good luck finding those lobbies if you don't have any friends. Enemy variety is also limited. There's only a few types of aliens with variations to each type, like a basic human-like one and one that shoots lasers, or a couple variations of bomber types, or a few other smaller enemies, few boss enemies like a giant, and 2 bullet sponge enemies. The Archeans have lost their uniqueness in design from Outbreak to be more consumer-friendly for our Chinese overlords. So basically, the game looks worse than Outbreak because of Chinese laws. There is, however, one exception to the art style rule, that being the Proteans. The Proteans are a unique enemy type that mimic one of, I think, 5 operators, taking a twist on that operator's abilities, like Alibi's clones being hostile and can move around too. These things are cool because they act in play like you, but with an alien twist. So naturally, they're designed to be a boss, and it takes 3 players to kill it. Now this might be my hot take for the game, but I think this sucks, because I think if they were less bullet spongy, had some more operator types, and maybe a couple more of them spawned in per incursion, I think they could have made a more fun, unique, but rare enemy type that you could run into, an enemy that acted like you and your squad, so you'd have to deal with essentially yourself. But it was never like a guarantee you would run into it. Maybe you would run into it on the hardest difficulty, maybe you wouldn't run into it on the hardest difficulty. Maybe they decided to spawn on an easier, lower difficulty. Them being bosses, while fun, does take away the coolness of them. Because now, you're just fighting a boss with a lot of health. I think the Apex was a much more unique boss-like enemy, as a floating creature that could call in other Archeans. But sadly, the Apex isn't nearly as scary as it once was. It looks more like Vecna from Stranger Things, and also there's a Demogorgon-type enemy too. That brings up another minor gripe. This game should have used the Stranger Things license instead of Far Cry 6. I like the Far Cry 6 Stranger Things DLC, but it would have worked and have been much cooler if it was used in Rainbow Six Extraction. Like, Rainbow Six Extraction already feels kind of like Stranger Things going into the Upside Down and everything, so like, what if they actually did do a Stranger Things crossover? You go into the Upside Down as like a portal or something, and then you're fighting actual Demogorgons. That would have been fucking awesome! But, whatever, I guess. The core gameplay wears on you. Spawn in, do mission, extract. Spawn in, do mission, extract. Spawn in, do mission, fight boss. Spawn and do mission, extract. There's just not a lot here to actually talk about. You can barricade and reinforce like in Siege, depending on the objective if you want, but it doesn't really do anything. The aliens can breach walls faster than any op in Siege. Door barricades barely slow them down. They are only a few times where you need to fortify an objective. And like I said, it barely does anything anyway. I guess it helps if you're playing on the harder difficulties with a squad, but at least in solo play, the game is balanced for solo play, so it does kind of make it not as important. That said, though, there are some unique things about the game. Some operators have different abilities, like Jaeger's ADS can kill aliens, and Lord Tachanka has his LMG again, and a few new pieces of equipment, like an auto turret. That's honestly the coolest part about the game. But that's about it. There just really isn't a whole lot to talk about, and it's so disappointing because I think this game has potential to be a really cool game. It's honestly a shame that this is probably going to be the last home console/PC Rainbow Six game we will ever get, and it had to go out on such a sour note. I didn't even know this game existed until like a year after it came out. Me, a huge fan of this franchise. I had no idea this game existed. Ubisoft did not advertise this game, they did not market this game, they did not promote this game. I heard and saw more advertising for Rainbow Six Small than I did this game. And that sucks. Because I really hope Ubisoft does try again, does try to revive this game and add in more stuff. Because it's a cool idea. I don't want to see it just die like this.